Seeing as I've been covering comics a lot more on this channel this year, and I've done a Marvel book and a DC book now, I think it's only fair that we start diving into some independent stuff and some licensed stuff. Because contrary to popular belief, licensed books do actually make up a fair amount of the industry. There's a lot of different licensed properties out there that have been very successful as comics, and some properties that we even think of today as being a thing from a much different type of medium actually got their start as fiction in comic books. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Transformers, two iconic 80s cartoon properties, actually began as comic books. But it's not always a surefire thing. You don't always click with the comic book going audiences right away, and that was the case for Power Rangers, which is kind of odd. You'd think such a superhero, fun, bright, flashy thing would work right away as a comic book, and there were a couple of books back during the MMPR and Zeo days, but nothing ever really stuck until just in the last 10 years, Boom Studios licensed the property from Saban back when they still owned it, and have retained that licenseship since. And before anyone leaves a comment, yes, I know we've already covered the Boom comics on the channel, but that video was more like a specific comparison and contrast of how the original 5 were written in the original show and in the Boom comics. It wasn't the general overview and guide to that I'm attempting to do here. Plus, that old video kind of had some weird cringe bullshit at the end of it that led into another video, and I don't really like that being on my channel anymore, so we might just go ahead and unlist that after this goes live, and maybe just restrict access to it to patrons. I don't know. That's up to future editing me. I gotta admit, I was pretty excited about this back when it first got announced. It seemed like just the kind of creative shakeup Power Rangers needed at a time when the show was just feeling very back and forth on whether it was going to be good or just stale, boring bullshit. And getting in that new fresh blood of somebody who didn't even grow up with Power Rangers, the writer they initially hired being Kyle Higgins, a guy who was an up-and-comer in the comic industry and seemed to have a few good things under his belt, but just didn't have that Ranger fan knowledge. While it was slightly worrying, I thought it could bring some interesting new concepts to the table, and the fact that it was going to be a retelling of MMPR but set in modern times and skipping past Day of the Dumpster and Green with Evil felt like a really good starting point, because you're getting past all of the initial stuff that people expect you to retell so that you can just get to the status quo that everybody knows and start doing interesting things with it. And that is exactly what Higgins did. His run isn't the best thing since sliced bread, but I really liked it at the time, and I still look back on it quite fondly, because it ended up being this really interesting exploration of Tommy Oliver as a character, his relationship with the rest of his initial team, and his relationship with the PR universe as a whole, because the big bad of Higgins' run ended up being an alternate universe version of Tommy who chose to stay evil after he was broken from Rita's spell, and eventually went power mad, drove his world into a post-apocalypse scenario, and started trying to conquer the entire PR multiverse, which led into a big Power Rangers comic book event storyline that felt genuinely exciting and like a big deal at the time, that brought in tons of lapsed fans from the comic book reading world and made Power Rangers kind of cool and fun to talk about at a time when, well, Ninja Steel was the new hotness. And that run is actually the only run I've gone out and bought entirely in trade. I love Higgins' run on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and I would love to do a full in-depth deep dive on it someday. So, you know, if you want to see that, why not show me that Power Rangers comic content is worth doing on this channel? Comment, like, subscribe, ring the bell, hit me up on social media, pledge to the Patreon, all that good stuff. But Higgins' run wasn't the only book that that was part of Shattered Grid, because thanks to the success of that initial Mighty Morphin book, Boom started up a second book called Go-Go Power Rangers from writer Ryan Parrott, which was exploring the early days of the MMPR team, the time in this universe between Day of the Dumpster and Green with Evil, and it actually is kind of better than Higgins's run most of the time, because it's a much more down-to-earth and character-based approach to the Mighty Morphin story that introduces a lot of interesting original concepts for the characters, like Bulk and Skull having been childhood friends, and there being another sixth member of the friend group who got ostracized because of the nature of them becoming Power Rangers requiring so much secrecy, and him eventually having to wiggle his way back into their lives in various ways. Genuinely, I think Go-Go is the place you start if you want to read these books. It is just such a warm and fun and also kind of action-packed at times retelling of a story that is much better than the original story even deserves, in my opinion. Dovetailing back into talking about the main book, though, after Higgins wrapped up his run, Marguerite Bennett came in to kind of shift over into something that sounded really exciting at the start, that being a more like homogenized team of Power Ranger Avengers, of various Rangers from across the franchise's history going on an adventure. But ultimately that run ended up not really being my kind of thing, because a lot of the characters didn't feel very consistent with how they were written in the show. The tone of it was just overall more of a darker, hard sci-fi piece than the fun action-adventure I want from Power Rangers, and honestly, I dropped it after about 5 or 6 issues and never went back and finished it. I know it has its fans, and there's certainly an audience out there for doing that stuff with Power Rangers, but it just wasn't what I wanted from the comics, and clearly it was the case for a lot of people, because Margaret Bennett's run actually ended up getting cut short when she was removed from the book, and Boom put Parrott on the main book as well, and sort of let him begin doing more complicated interweaved stories between both Go-Go and MMPR. And when he did that, the book jumped forward a bit to a post-power transfer status quo, with the White Ranger and Zed now being more prominent things in the book, as well as Adam, Rocky, and Aisha showing up. But they didn't just stop using Zach, Trini, and Jason. They got their own thing to do, because they became a comic original concept called the Omega Rangers, which I really like, actually. Getting rid of the peace conference from the show, just having it be a cover story so that you can do more interesting things with the sort of original versions of these characters that you've developed in the comics so far, is a smart idea in my opinion, and it worked pretty well. Most of the stuff that goes on with the Omega Rangers is some of the most interesting stuff in Parrott's run, in my opinion. But unfortunately, I think that's about as positive as I can be about the time when he was writing the book, with 2 issues coming out a month and it being rebranded to 2 different books, one called Mighty Morphin, one called Power Rangers, because I don't know, I think Parrott just works much better as a character writer than he does a big universe epic storyteller, and that's what he was trying to be during this time. He started telling bigger and more epic storylines, delving into the backstories of Zordon and Zed, and fleshing out what exactly the Eltarians were, and leading into a big event about the Eltarians that just wasn't that interesting to me, and came off as more fan fiction than anything, and not in like a fun forever read way. And even when that stuff wrapped up and we got the final few issues of Parrott's run, with him doing the charge to issue 100 overall, and introducing concepts like Andros and the Death Ranger to the book, which fans were very hyped for at the time, and I was sort of tentatively excited for, but I don't really like the way Parrott wrote Andros, as just kind of blindly doing whatever it takes to try and get Zane back, and doing stupid shit in the pursuit of that and unleashing things like the Death Ranger, and the Death Ranger, yeah, being cool in being the first non-binary Power Ranger, even in their origin where they're not the Death Ranger, but the actual threat and the arc that is them attacking in the present just kind of feels like we need something really big and cool to happen for issue 100, and we just did our really big cool event end of everything we've been building to, so quick, let's pull something out of our ass. Don't get me wrong, there were some nice moments in issue 100. I love the send-off they give Jason as a character in the comics, but just not a fan of the way Parrott's run ended up going after he got full control of the books. I felt like he was much more interesting when he was trying to do much more down-to-earth character stuff in his early days. But it's not all doom and gloom, because since issue 100, a new writer has come in and taken over the book, with it going back to just being Mighty Morphin Power Rangers once a month, and that is Melissa Flores, who actually worked on the Power Rangers TV show for quite a while as a producer, and as such, I feel like she's been able to do an amazing job of getting us back to the level of quality that was there during Higgins's run. I feel like every issue of her run so far has been just really solid, giving us both like little character moments, progressing the arcs of every single Ranger, even though there's like 20 of them in the book now, keeping the villains interesting and threatening, and giving little winks and nods to the show's lore, while also building more new original comic universe lore, and having those two things play together much more nicely than they did during the end of Parrott's run, in my opinion. And that's not to say it's gonna be the best thing ever all the way through. It still hasn't quite reached early Ryan Parrott levels of quality, in my opinion, and there's quite a ways to go if Flores tends to have a run as long as Parrott or Higgins. But so far, it's been really fun, and it's been a slow process of me getting back into Power Rangers comics and wanting to talk about them for you people so you can get interested in reading Power Rangers comics. And that's the best sign that a book is good, that it makes you want to talk about it and get other people into it. And let me tell you, the last couple issues of MMPR have been legit bangers worth checking out. And you can probably get into it if you just read like brief Wikipedia summaries of the runs ahead of time and start at issue 101. But I would honestly recommend checking out the whole of the Boom Comics universe, because while it's been a bumpy ride at times, it has been interesting all the way through. At least the main books. They've been a real bastion of good, fun, modern-feeling storytelling with the classic Power Rangers characters and aesthetics in a time where that's sometimes been in short supply, sometimes just been a cool side novelty. And I've said all this, and I haven't even gone into the fact that the art is consistently great in all these comics. There's been a lot of like early career-defining work from artists like Dan Mora and Hendry Prestley all the way through. And it always switches up in a way that feels welcome and fun and fresh, and not abrupt and like they were just trying to get the book out on time, like some books from the Big Two have been feeling recently. And before I wrap up, it does also bear mentioning that there have been a ton of like side books, miniseries, and one-shots and stuff like that. And there's even more of that on the horizon. That evil alternate universe version of Tommy I spoke about from Higgins's run, Lord Draken, he became so popular in his own right that he's going to be getting a special one-shot in celebration of Power Rangers' 30th anniversary in a few months. And Amy Jo Johnson, everybody's favorite self-important white lady, is getting her own reinterpretation of MMPR book in the not-too-distant future. But again, this is meant to be more of an overview of the main book and sort of a good entry point for people. I don't want to get too bogged down in side content, so we're just going to leave all of that as stories for another day, just like how I want to eventually go more in depth on all these runs individually one day. But for now, I figured it would just be kind of fun to come on and do a new video that's my general thoughts on the Power Rangers comics so far, and tell you guys that, hey, my thoughts are, well, there's been hiccups here and there. They're good. You should go check them out. Go to your local comic book store and pick up some issues, or if you don't have a local comic book store, go to your local bookstore, pick up some trades, and if you don't have a local bookstore, hopefully you have the internet and you can use the special methods that I'm quite fond of. But yeah, guys, that's gonna do it for this one. So until next time, this is the Vacuuminator reminding you that you never truly fail until you stop trying. And hey, Power Rangers as a franchise has proved that true because, well, they stopped trying for a bit there when they tried again to get back into comics and make that a storytelling medium for the franchise. It has been hugely successful for them, and I think it will continue to be because, well, it's good shit. And I like reading good shit. I like talking about good shit. And if you keep trying to make good shit will happen to you. So, see you around.